What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the BLU F92e 5G and going over whether or not it's actually a good phone to buy in 2023. Now, this phone is still technically pretty new, having come out in January of 2023, so really only a few months ago. But since then, a lot of other options have come out, so we're going to be going over this phone's specs and features to give you a better idea of whether or not it's the right phone for you. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where we'll be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the BLU F92e 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So despite not really being the most amazing display ever, in fact for an entry-level phone, I want to say it's pretty much exactly what you would expect. But for what it is still pretty decent. At 6.5 inches, the display is definitely a decent size, so if you're going to be on your phone a good amount, doing stuff like web browsing, watching videos, using social media, things like that, you will get a pretty good experience. With the 20:9 aspect ratio, we're also getting a pretty tall and narrow form factor. So in landscape mode, for example, you are going to get a nice immersive experience. Things are going to look a bit more cinematic, and this is especially so since the bezels on the side at least are pretty thin. So yeah, things definitely look real nice here. And then if you're doing really anything that involves scrolling, like social media for example, with this kind of tall and narrow form factor, you'll be able to fit a decent amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. So when it comes to size and dimensions, despite not being anything out of the ordinary per se, I definitely do think we're getting a pretty good display here. And even with the image quality, despite only having a 720p resolution, which is I guess kind of a bummer, especially if you're watching a lot of videos and doing stuff where the image quality is a bit more important, it still does look decently sharp. I mean, it's definitely not terrible. And the colors and brightness are also pretty good. So in general, if you are looking for more of a basic device and you're not necessarily going to be on your phone all day, but you still are going to be using it a decent amount for various different things, then I do think you will get a good experience here. Now for storage, the BLU F92e 5G is getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion. So definitely a great amount of storage, especially considering this phone is retailing for under $150. So if you are looking for something more affordable, but maybe you like to do a lot of things on your phone, so you have a bunch of different apps, for example, in that kind of situation, this phone is going to be a great choice. And compared to the average phone in this price range, honestly, it really varies a lot, especially with carrier deals. But as far as full price goes, I've seen phones that go at full price for even more than this. They'll only have 32GB, like the Motorola Moto G Play 2023, for example. That phone retails for about $160, $170, and the storage is honestly really bad on that phone. So yeah, definitely compared to most other phones in this price range, there really aren't very many that have this much storage. For security features, the BLU F92e 5G does have Face Unlock, as well as a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So definitely nice to get both options, but let's go ahead and give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive, no issues at all. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the BLU F92e 5G, we got a typical water drop notch for the selfie camera. Definitely not bad, but nothing really spectacular either. It looks okay, and if you're in landscape mode watching a video, for example, it doesn't really get in the way that much. I mean, I have seen worse, but it still would have been nicer to have a hole punch, but it is what it is. This camera is 13 megapixels, and then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 0.3 megapixel depth sensing camera. So a pretty decent camera setup here. And for the average user, the photo quality is going to be perfectly good enough too. Whether you're taking pictures for more unimportant things like Snapchat, for example, or maybe you're sending pictures to friends and family, or even the occasional Instagram photo every now and then, no matter what you're doing, whether it's a little bit more meaningless or a little bit more important, the camera we're getting with this phone is good enough to get the job done either way. To give you an idea of what it can do, here's some pictures taken with the main camera of the BLU F92e 5G. And again, for what it is, I definitely do think the camera is pretty good. Sure, it's not like top of the line studio quality, and if you're really serious about mobile photography, you are going to want to spend a bit more and get something higher end. But for the average user, for most people, I feel like it's going to be perfectly fine. I mean, if you put a picture like this on Instagram, it would blend in with everything else just fine. So in general, if you are looking for an entry-level 5G phone that has a really nice camera, then you won't be disappointed here. When it comes to video, this phone has a max recording quality of 1080p in the front, but it can record 2K videos in the rear. In my opinion, 2K isn't really that special because although not very many phones can actually record 2K videos, I feel like there's a reason for it, because who's actually recording in 2K? I mean, if you're going to record on a higher resolution than 1080p, most people are probably probably going to look at 4K, but I will say it is at least unique, and the video quality itself does look really good in my opinion. So if you are recording videos and you want them to look a bit nicer, I do think you will be happy with the quality here. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the BLU F92e 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. So definitely a great processor, and when it comes to overall performance, in my experience, while not being lightning fast or anything, for a phone you can get for $149, it definitely is good enough, and especially for more basic activities like web browsing, light social media use, and watching videos, things like that, it will definitely get the job done. So if you are looking for something for more basic activities, then you're really not going to go wrong here. That being said though, keep in mind if you are more of a power user, if you're maybe constantly playing games like Call of Duty for example, that are a little bit more graphics heavy, then it might struggle a bit, which is probably not a surprise. So if that is you, you might want to spend a bit more and get something higher end. And then of course, as the name suggests, the BLU F92e 5G does have 5G connectivity. So considering how affordable it is, it really goes to show that as time goes on, 5G connectivity is becoming more and more accessible, so definitely a nice thing to see. Now I did run a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this phone stands performance-wise compared to your current device. Because depending on what you have right now, it may or may not actually be an upgrade. But again, in general, I feel like for the average user, as long as you're doing more basic activities and you're not going to be like glued to your phone all day, you will probably get a pretty good experience here. Now for the battery, the BLU F92e 5G has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10-watt fast charging. So on one hand, the fast charging is kind of mediocre. I guess in this price range, it's pretty expected. Sure, there are some Samsung phones that have 15 and some other phones that are a little less than this that don't have fast charging at all, but at this level, it's not really that much of a difference in my experience, unless you're expecting it to charge in like 20 minutes. The charging speed is perfectly fine, but with a 5000 mAh battery, definitely a really large battery here. So if battery life and longevity is more of a priority for you, then this phone is going to be a great choice. Now for the software, this phone does have Android 12, which is I guess okay, but considering this is 2023 and we are on Android 13, it would have been nice to see it actually come with the latest software. And knowing BLU's software support, I doubt it's actually going to get a major update. So if you do get this phone, just know you are going to have to be okay with being stuck on Android 12, because although I guess it's possible it might get Android 13 in the future, I'm really not counting on it. But that being said, compared to other phones like this, with the exception of Samsung, most other phones do still have Android 12 for whatever reason. Now when it comes to brands like Motorola, for example, I'm sure they will get an update at some point, so something like a Motorola Moto G Stylus, for example, in that sense is still going to have somewhat of an edge over this phone, but at least Android 12 isn't terrible. So seeing that some other BLU phones like the BLU Bold N2, for example, only have Android 11, I guess it could always be worse. Now another disappointing thing here is that with the BLU F92e 5G, we're not getting NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you are going to want to skip this one. And at this point in 2023, with pretty much every store at this point having some sort of tap and pay, I feel like every smartphone should have it at this point. I mean, it's such a common feature, so not having it is definitely a huge drawback. But that being said, if you don't use it and you don't ever see yourself using it, then I guess it won't matter. But all the same, if you do like to have features like that, then again, seeing as the BLU F92e 5G doesn't have that feature, you're probably going to want to avoid this phone. But in conclusion, is the BLU F92e 5G really worth buying in 2023? In general, I feel like for a really specific situation where maybe you want a super affordable phone for more basic activities, but you also want a ton of storage, a decent camera, good performance, and 5G connectivity, in that kind of situation, honestly, this phone is going to be great. But that being said, when you compare it to other 5G phones like the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G, OnePlus Nord N300 5G, or really any 5G Motorola phone, I feel like those options when it comes to features, software support, and even performance are quite a bit better. So in general, if you really don't care about maximizing your features or anything like that, and you really just need something basic that works and you want 5G connectivity and good storage, then in that case, this phone is going to be perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, there are plenty of other phones that do exactly what this phone does, but maybe even a bit better. So is it the best option? For most people, probably not, but is it at least worth considering? In a lot of cases, I do think it still is. Now, once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description where we'll be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.